scientific death.
In 1980, Lake Peigneur in Louisiana was a quiet, unassuming body of water. It was a shallow freshwater lake, averaging only 10 feet deep, used primarily for fishing. But beneath the lake bed sat an entirely different world. The Diamond Crystal Salt Mine was a sprawling, subterranean industrial complex, dug into a massive salt dome. This cross-section shows the proximity of these two environments. Massive pillars of salt supported the ceiling, with only a thin layer of earth and rock keeping the lake water from flooding the caverns below. This geography meant that a fragile physical boundary was the only thing separating the surface ecosystem from the massive industrial void underneath. On the morning of November 20th, a Texaco oil rig was stationed on the lake's surface, probing the lake bed for a new oil deposit. The crew believed they were drilling in a safe zone, well away from the mine below. But they were working with a coordinate calculation error that placed the rig directly over the mine's upper shafts. The rig's spinning 14-inch drill bit chewed through the rock and accidentally punctured the ceiling of the salt mine. A 14-inch hole sounds tiny compared to the volume of a lake spanning hundreds of acres, but that puncture was enough to compromise the entire structure. By piercing that ceiling, the drilling crew had effectively pulled the plug on a 70-acre bathtub. This triggered a chemical process called leaching. When fresh water contacts solid rock salt, it dissolves incredibly fast, creating an exponential loop. Water widens the hole, allowing even more water to rush in. Within minutes, the salt pillars failed, and the entire mine ceiling collapsed. The initial 14-inch puncture grew into a 200-foot wide chasm in just hours. The mapping error triggered a chemical loop that the drilling crew was powerless to stop. Underground, 55 miners were working their shift when they suddenly heard a deafening roar of water. Moments later, the facility's power failed. Plunged into pitch black, the crew had to navigate the sprawling labyrinth of the mine by relying on the sound of the rushing water to find an exit. As the lower levels flooded, the miners crammed into a slow-moving service elevator, reaching the surface just as the mine dissolved behind them. On the surface, the draining lake formed a massive whirlpool. This vortex was violently dragging everything on the water down into the mine. The section dragged down the drilling rig, 70 acres of land, and 11 industrial barges, which were tossed around like bath toys. One of those barges carried a dog when it was pulled into the abyss. Miraculously, as the water pressure equalized, the barge popped back up to the surface, and the dog was found completely unharmed. The collapse created two simultaneous disasters: a survival race in the dark below, and an incredible display of physics in the light above. Filling a subterranean void that large creates immense negative pressure on the surface. That vacuum had to pull water from wherever it could. Lake Peigneur connects to the Del Cambre Canal, which normally flows south into the Gulf of Mexico. The suction was so powerful it reversed the flow of the entire canal, pulling ocean water back toward the lake. Salt water from the Gulf began pouring backward into the crater. This created a temporary 164-foot waterfall, the tallest ever recorded in the state. These forces were so powerful they temporarily overrode the region's natural hydrological rules. Despite the scale of the destruction, not a single human life was lost. The financial toll was significant, with Texaco and the drillers paying tens of millions in settlements for the destroyed property and the lost mine. Because the vacuum pulled in so much ocean water, the lake never returned to its original state. The 10-foot-deep freshwater ecosystem is now a deep saltwater basin, inhabited by species usually found in the open ocean. The misplaced coordinate on a surface map resulted in an irreversible change to the local landscape.